The glass
Okafor.
shattered against the wall, missing Amara's head by
Don't do
inches.
this to me
You
again.
useless
Why would you
cripple.
be beating me
Chidi's
over and
voice
over
thundered through their
again?
Lagos apartment as he grabbed another plate from the dining table. 3 years in that wheelchair and you can't even cook a proper meal. What would you do if your husband threw dishes at you for burning his dinner? Hit like if you've witnessed domestic violence, and comment below where you're watching from. Amara's hands trembled on the wheels of her chair as she tried to back away, but the small kitchen offered nowhere to hide. The accident that had stolen her ability to walk had happened 2 years into their marriage, a car crash on the third mainland bridge that left her paralyzed from the waist down. For the first 6 months, Chidi had played the devoted husband at the hospital, posting their photos on social media with captions about unconditional love. But once the cameras stopped, once the visitors quit coming, his mask crumbled like old paint. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over his rage. "The stove, it's hard to reach from." "Hard to reach?" He kicked her wheelchair, sending it rolling backward. "Everything's hard for you now, isn't it? You think I married you to be your nurse?" Tears streamed down Amara's face as she gripped the armrests to steady herself. At 32, she had once been a vibrant marketing executive at Okonkwo Industries, one of Nigeria's largest conglomerates. Now she was trapped in this 3-bedroom apartment in Lekki Phase 1, dependent on a man who had grown to hate her. "Chidi, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm trying my best." "The physical therapy. Your best?" He laughed bitterly, loosening his designer tie. He worked as a senior project manager at Okonkwo Industries, a position that paid well enough to maintain their lifestyle. "Your best is lying in that chair all day while I work 12-hour shifts to keep this roof over your head?" He moved closer, and Amara smelled the perfume on his shirt, sweet and floral, definitely not hers. It wasn't the first time she'd noticed unfamiliar scents clinging to his clothes, or the late-night phone calls he took on the balcony, or the lipstick stains he claimed were from office parties. "Where were you last night?" The question escaped before she could stop it. His eyes darkened. "What did you say?" "You came home at 2 a.m. You said you were working late, but..." The slap came so fast the morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Okonkwo Industries' executive boardroom on the 40th floor of their Victoria Island headquarters. Amara sat in her wheelchair at the head of the mahogany conference table, surrounded by lawyers in expensive suits who spoke in terms she was still trying to absorb. Have you ever had to hide your power from someone who underestimated you? Comment yes if you've ever been underestimated, and tell us where you're watching from. Lagos? Nairobi? Atlanta? Your uncle was very specific in his will, Barrister Adeyemi explained, sliding documents across the polished table. He wanted you to have full control before any public announcement was made. He knew about your situation at home. Amara's throat tightened. He knew. He hired a private investigator 6 months before he died. He was concerned about you. The lawyer opened a folder. "These are photos of your husband with a woman named Blessing Okonkwo." "Okonkwo?" Amara's heart stopped. "Your uncle's former executive assistant. She was fired 2 months before his death for embezzlement, but the case was settled privately. Your husband began a relationship with her shortly after." The photos made Amara's stomach turn. Chidi and a beautiful woman with long braids, laughing at a restaurant in Ikoyi. Chidi and the same woman entering a hotel in Lekki. Chidi kissing her in the parking lot of the office where Amara had once worked. "How long?" Amara whispered. 14 months. Since shortly after your accident." The room spun. While she'd been learning to use a wheelchair, attending painful physical therapy sessions, crying herself to sleep because she couldn't feel her legs, he'd been building a whole life without her. "There's more," Barrister Adeyemi continued gently. "Blessing is pregnant. 3 months. Your husband has been planning to divorce you to marry her." The words hit like a physical blow. Amara gripped the armrests of her wheelchair, fighting the wave of nausea. "We found divorce papers in his email drafts," the lawyer said. "He was planning to claim abandonment, to say you left him, and that your disability..." The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and transformation. Would you keep quiet if you knew a major confrontation was coming? Drop a fire if you'd stay silent and plan your revenge. Comment where you're watching from. Is it Accra? Johannesburg? New York? On Friday morning, a team arrived at Amara's apartment while Chidi was at work. Interior designers, medical equipment specialists, and contractors transformed the space she'd learned to navigate in her wheelchair into something entirely different: wider doorways, modified kitchen counters, a state-of-the-art bathroom with accessibility features that made her weep with relief. No more struggling. No more depending on Chidi for basic dignity. The locksmith came at noon. Every lock changed, every key remade. Chidi's keys would open nothing when he returned. Mrs. Okafor, the head of her new security detail, said, a tall, no-nonsense woman named Patience who'd served in the military before joining private security. We'll have someone posted at your building entrance 24 hours a day. He won't get past the lobby without your permission. What if he makes a scene? Patience's smile was grim. Then we document it and add it to the legal file. Either way, he doesn't touch you again. By Friday evening, Amara sat in her transformed living room, barely recognizing her own home. The broken plates were gone, replaced by beautiful new dinnerware. The walls Chidi had damaged in his rages were repaired and repainted in calming blues and grays. Her wheelchair could move freely through every room now, no longer constrained by narrow passages and his disregard for her needs. At 7 p.m., she heard the key turning in the lock. Then the frustrated jiggling as Chidi realized it didn't work. The pounding started immediately. Amara, what's going on? Why doesn't my key work? She wheeled to the door but didn't open it. Her voice was calm through the wood. You don't live here anymore, Chidi. Silence. Then, what? I said you don't live here anymore. Your belongings are in storage. The address is in your email. The pounding intensified. Are you insane? Open this door right now. No. Amara, I swear to God. You'll what? Her voice remained steady. Break down the door? Assault me again? There are cameras everywhere now, Chidi. Security in the lobby. And I have a lawyer on speed dial. Everything you do from this moment on is documented. She heard his breathing, heavy and angry, through the door. You can't do this. This is my apartment. I pay for everything. Actually, the lease is in my name. It always was. My uncle insisted on it when we got married, something about protecting my assets. Funny how that worked out. Your assets? You don't have any assets? You're a disabled woman with no job and no money. Amara smiled. That's where you're wrong. But you'll find out soon enough. Go to Blessing's house, Chidi. I'm sure she'll take you in. After all, gentlemen, Barrister Adeyemi's voice cut through the room. Allow me to introduce the new CEO and majority shareholder of Okonkwo Industries, Mrs. Amara Okafor. The room exploded in murmurs. Chidi's face went from shock to white to a sickly gray. And Amara smiled. Are you ready for the confrontation of a lifetime? Comment yes if you can't wait to see Chidi's face when reality hits. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Chapter 4 is going to be explosive. Share this with someone who loves justice being served. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below. The silence that followed the announcement was thick enough to cut. What would you do if you became your abuser's boss overnight? Hit like if you'd make them pay, and comment where you're watching from. London? Dubai? Toronto? Chidi stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. This is a joke. This has to be a joke. Sit down, Mr. Okafor, Barrister Adeyemi said calmly. We're just getting started. Amara, Chidi's voice cracked as he looked at her. What is this? What's happening? She met his eyes with a steadiness she'd never felt before. This is your reckoning. The projector screen behind her flickered to life. Photos appeared, images she recognized from the private investigator's file. Chidi and Blessing at restaurants, hotels, shopping for furniture together. The timestamps showed dates stretching back 14 months, corroborating everything the lawyers had told her. For those who don't know, Amara's voice rang clear through the room. That's my husband with his girlfriend, Blessing Okonkwo, former employee of this company, dismissed for embezzlement. They've been conducting an affair for over a year while I recovered from a devastating accident that left me paralyzed. Gasps rippled through the room. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. One older woman, Mrs. Nwosu from accounting, covered her mouth with her hand. That's not, you don't understand, Chidi stammered. I understand perfectly, Amara interrupted. While I was attending physical therapy, learning to live with my disability, you were planning to divorce me and claim I was mentally incompetent so you could keep all our assets. You told your girlfriend I was already divorced and living with family in Enugu. You erased me from your life while I was still sleeping in our bed. The next slide showed medical reports. Photos of bruises on Amara's arms, a split lip, the documentation from the hospital visits she'd made claiming she'd fallen from her wheelchair. These are from the past 18 months, Amara continued, her voice never wavering despite the tears threatening to fall. Injuries sustained from domestic violence. My husband, who you all know as Chidi Okafor, senior project manager, has been physically and emotionally abusing me since my accident made me dependent on him. The room erupted. Several people stood, voices overlapping in shock and outrage. Chidi's face had gone from gray to red, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. This is slander, he shouted. You're lying. You fell, you're always falling. Am I? Amara gestured to Ngozi, who pressed a button on her laptop. Audio filled the room. Chidi's voice, crystal clear, screaming through their apartment. You useless cripple. 3 years in that wheelchair and you can't even cook a proper meal. The sound of breaking glass. Amara's voice, small and frightened, Chidi, please. Then the unmistakable sound of a slap, and Amara's cry of pain. The recording had been captured on a phone she'd hidden in the kitchen, advised by her lawyer to document everything after the first legal consultation. The board members sat in stunned silence. Mrs. Nwosu was openly crying. The CFO, a stern man named Mr. Adebayo, stared at Chidi with undisguised disgust. Actually, Mrs. Nwosu spoke up, her voice shaking but firm. I've worked with Mrs. Okafor before her accident. She was brilliant, one of the sharpest marketing minds we had. And from what I'm seeing today, she still is. You're the one who looks unstable, Chidi. Other voices joined in. I always thought something was off about him. He was too smooth, too perfect. Remember when he took credit for Janet's campaign? I bet that wasn't the first time. Chidi's carefully constructed reputation crumbled in real time. His colleagues, people he'd worked with for 5 years, turned against him in minutes. Bring in Miss Okonkwo, Amara said quietly. 2 security guards escorted a very pregnant Blessing into the room. She looked around confused, her eyes landing on Chidi with a smile that quickly faded as she took in the hostile atmosphere. Chidi? What's going on? You said this was a job interview. Miss Okonkwo, Amara addressed her directly. I'm Amara Okafor, Chidi's wife. Blessing's face went pale. But he said you were divorced. He lied. We're still very much married. Or we were, until I filed papers last week. Amara kept her voice gentle. Despite everything, this woman was a victim too. He also didn't tell you about the embezzlement charges you're facing, did he? Or that the apartment you're living in was furnished with stolen company funds? Blessing turned to Chidi, her eyes filling with tears. You said you bought everything yourself. You said we'd get married as soon as your divorce was final. You said? Baby, I can explain, Chidi started. Don't call me that. Blessing's voice cracked. I'm pregnant. I quit my job at the law firm because you said you'd take care of it. 3 weeks later, Amara sat in her new office on the 40th floor, reviewing quarterly reports while Legos sparkled below her through floor-to-ceiling windows. Would you ever forgive someone who abused you if they came crawling back? Comment and know if you'd stand your ground. Tell us where you're watching from. The office had been her uncle's, spacious, elegant, with African art on the walls and a view that stretched across Victoria Island to the harbor. Her wheelchair fit perfectly behind the massive desk, specially lowered to her specifications. Everything about this space had been designed to empower her, not limit her. Her phone buzzed. Ngozi's name flashed on the screen. Mrs. Okafor, we have a situation. What kind of situation? Chidi is in the lobby. He's demanding to see you. Amara's heart raced despite herself. 3 weeks of silence since his termination, 3 weeks of peace, and now this. Did he forget about the restraining order? Apparently. He's claiming it's about personal property he left at the apartment. Security is holding him, but he's making quite a scene. Should we call the police? Amara thought for a moment. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to let others handle it, to avoid confrontation. That was the old Amara, the frightened woman who'd been conditioned to fear him. But she wasn't that woman anymore. Bring him up, she said. With security present and cameras recording. If he wants to talk, we'll talk. But on my terms. 10 minutes later, Chidi stood before her desk, flanked by 2 security guards. He looked terrible, unshaven, his clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. The confident, polished man who'd terrorized her was gone, replaced by someone desperate and broken. Amara, he started, his voice hoarse. Thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes, she said coolly. And if you violate the restraining order again, I will have you arrested. So whatever you have to say it quickly. He shifted on his feet, glancing at the guards. Can we talk alone? No. Amara, please. I'm not here to hurt you. I need help. She almost laughed. You need help? From me? I can't find work. Every company I apply to calls here for references, and, he SW. Retrio. Continue. Aloud hard. And they hear what happened. My name is ruined. I can't get hired anywhere in Lagos. My accounts are frozen because of the embezzlement investigation. I have nowhere to live, Blessing threw me out. I'm staying with my cousin in a 1-room apartment in Mushin. Amara listened without expression. The neighborhood he mentioned was worlds away from the luxury of Lekki, where he'd lived in comfort while abusing her. I'm sorry, he continued, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry for everything. I was terrible to you. I was cruel and violent and I took advantage of your situation. I know that now. I've had time to think, to realize what I lost. What you lost? Amara's voice was ice. Let's be clear about what you lost, Chidi. You lost a job you were stealing from. You lost a reputation you built on lies. You lost a mistress who only wanted you for your money. What exactly am I supposed to feel sorry for? I lost you, he said quietly. I lost my wife. The woman I married. The woman I loved before. Before I became disabled? Amara finished. Before I stopped being useful to you? Before I couldn't walk and became an inconvenience. I handled it badly. I know that. But we were happy once, weren't we? Before the accident? We had something real. We had something, Amara agreed. But it wasn't real. Because real love doesn't evaporate the moment things get difficult. Real love doesn't turn into violence and cruelty when your partner needs you most. What we had was conditional. You loved me as long as I fit your image of a perfect wife. That's not fair. Fair? Her voice rose. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you threw glass at my head? When you slapped me for asking where you'd been? When you told me I should have died in that accident? Chidi's face crumpled. I never meant. Yes, you did. You meant every word. And now that you're facing consequences, now that your comfortable life is gone, you come here expecting sympathy? Expecting me to save you? I'm not expecting anything, he said, wiping his eyes. I just thought, maybe you could give me a reference. Just something basic so I can get work. I'm not asking for my job back or anything like that. Just a chance to start over. A chance? Amara leaned forward. I gave you chances, Chidi. Every time you hit me and apologized. Every time you promised to do better. Every time I believed your lies about working late or office parties. I gave you chance after chance, and you repaid me with betrayal. What do you want from me? His voice turned angry, the old Chidi emerging. You want me to grovel? I'm groveling. You want me to suffer? I'm suffering. My life is destroyed. Isn't that enough? It's not about revenge, Amara said quietly. It's about consequences. You made choices, to abuse me, to steal from the company, to lie to everyone. Those choices have results. That's not my fault. That's yours. So you won't help me. No. I won't. Chidi stared at her, and for a moment, she saw hatred flash in his eyes, the same look he'd given her before the violence started. But the security guards shifted, the door closed behind him. Amara sat in the silence that followed, her hands trembling slightly. Even now, even with all her power and protection, confronting him had been terrifying. But she'd done it. She'd faced him without flinching, without apologizing for taking up space, without shrinking herself to make him comfortable. Her phone rang. Barrister Adeyemi. I heard what happened. Are you all right? I'm fine, Amara said, surprised to find it was true. Better than fine. I stood up to him. Even sitting down. The lawyer chuckled. That's the spirit. Now, there's something else we need to discuss. The embezzlement case. The prosecutor wants to know if you're willing to testify. Will it help convict him? Your testimony about the company finances and his access to accounts would be crucial. But it means seeing him again in court. Facing cross-examination. Having his lawyers try to discredit you. Amara thought of all the women who'd been abused, who'd been too afraid or too broken to fight back. She thought of Blessing, pregnant and deceived. She thought of everyone Chidi might hurt if he wasn't held accountable. I'll testify, she said firmly. Whatever it takes. After the call, she returned to her reports, but her concentration was broken. The confrontation with Chidi had stirred up emotions she'd tried to bury: fear, anger, grief for the marriage that never truly existed. A knock at her door. Mrs. Nwosu from accounting entered, carrying a folder. Mrs. Okafor, I hope this isn't a bad time. Not at all. Please, sit. The older woman settled into a chair, looking uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize. For not seeing what was happening to you. For not speaking up when Chidi worked here and I saw things. What things? The way he spoke about you when you weren't around. After your accident, he'd complain about how difficult you made his life, how expensive your care was. He made it sound like you were a burden. And I'm ashamed to say I believed him. I pitied him. I never thought about what it must have been like for you. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. You couldn't have known. The courtroom in the Lagos High Court was packed with spectators, journalists, and lawyers when Amara wheeled in 6 weeks later. Would you be brave enough to testify against your abuser in front of everyone? Drop a red heart if you think Amara's courage is inspiring. Tell us where you're watching from. She wore a navy blue suit with gold accessories, her braids styled elegantly, her spine straight despite sitting in her wheelchair. Patients flanked her on one side, Barrister Adeyemi on the other. The media had been following the case obsessively. Disabled CEO testifies against abusive husband, read one headline. From victim to victor, Amara Okafor's journey, proclaimed another. Across the room, Chidi sat with his public defender. He couldn't afford private counsel anymore. He looked gaunt, defeated, nothing like the confident man who'd terrorized her. When their eyes met, he quickly looked away. All rise for the Honorable Justice Adebisi, the bailiff announced. The proceedings began with the prosecutor laying out the charges: embezzlement, fraud, assault, and intimidation. Evidence was presented: financial records, security footage, medical reports. But the prosecution insisted they needed Amara's testimony to establish the full pattern of abuse and manipulation. The prosecution calls Mrs. Amara Okafor to the stand. Amara wheeled to the witness box, which had been modified to accommodate her wheelchair. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The weight of every eye in the courtroom pressed against her, but she kept her composure. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Mrs. Oluwazian, began gently. "Mrs. Okafor, can you tell the court about your marriage to the defendant?" "We were married 5 years ago," Amara began, her voice steady. "The first 2 years were good. Normal. We had disagreements like any couple, but nothing alarming. Then I had a car accident on 3rd Mainland Bridge that left me paralyzed from the waist down." "And how did your relationship change after the accident?" "Gradually at first. Chidi was supportive in the hospital, publicly. He posted on social media about being a devoted husband. But once we were home, once the visitors stopped coming, he changed. He became resentful. Angry. He started calling me a burden." "Can you describe the first instance of physical violence?" Amara's throat tightened. "It was about 4 months after I came home from rehabilitation. I was struggling to cook dinner from my wheelchair. The kitchen wasn't accessible then. I burned the rice. He came home from work and he threw the pot across the room. It hit the wall near my head. He said I was useless, that I couldn't do anything right anymore." "And did the violence escalate?" "Yes. Over the next year, it became regular. He'd push my wheelchair roughly, slam doors when I was nearby, throw things. Then it became more direct, slapping, grabbing my face, pulling my hair. He knew I couldn't run away. Couldn't fight back physically." Mrs. Oluwazian presented the medical records. "These are from Lagos General Hospital, dated over the past 18 months. Can you confirm these injuries?" Amara looked at the photos, her split lip, the bruises on her arms, the black eye. "Yes. I told the doctors I'd fallen from my wheelchair. I was too ashamed to tell the truth." "Why were you ashamed?" "Because I was supposed to be strong. I'd been a successful executive, independent, confident. And suddenly I was this person who couldn't even protect herself in her own home. I thought maybe I deserved it somehow. Maybe I was the burden he said I was." Several women in the gallery nodded, their faces sympathetic. They understood. "Let's talk about the embezzlement," Mrs. Oluwazian continued. "Did you know your husband was stealing from Okonkwo Industries?" "No. Not until after I inherited the company. The auditors discovered it during a routine review. He'd been diverting funds for over a year, 50 million naira total. He used the money to furnish an apartment for his girlfriend, to buy gifts, to fund a lifestyle separate from our marriage." "And you discovered this girlfriend was pregnant with his child?" "Yes. Blessing Okonkwo. 3 months pregnant when the affair was exposed. He'd told her we were divorced. He'd created an entire false narrative where I didn't exist." The prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to play the audio recording from the night before Mrs. Okafor changed the locks on their apartment." Chidi's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. That recording was obtained without my client's knowledge or consent. In cases of domestic violence, such recordings are admissible," Justice Adebisi ruled. "Overruled. Play the audio." The courtroom fell silent as Chidi's voice filled the space, angry, venomous, cruel. "You useless cripple. 3 years in that wheelchair and you can't even cook a proper meal." The crash of breaking glass. Amara's frightened voice, "Chidi, please." Then the slap, and her cry of pain. "You're questioning me? You, who can't even walk. Without me, you'd be begging on the streets of Lagos like the other disabled people nobody wants." Several people in the gallery gasped. One woman openly wept. Even the judge's expression hardened. When the audio ended, the silence was deafening. "Mrs. Okafor," Mrs. Oluwazian said gently, "why didn't you leave sooner?" "Because I believed him," Amara said, tears finally spilling over. "I believed I was worthless. I believed no one else would want me. I believed I deserved the pain because my disability made me a burden. He spent months convincing me of that, breaking down my self-worth until I had nothing left. And what changed? I inherited my uncle's company. Suddenly I had resources, had power, had people telling me I didn't have to live that way. It was like waking up from a nightmare and realizing the monster couldn't actually hurt me anymore. Thank you, Mrs. Okafor. Your witness, Mrs. Oluwazian said to the defense. Chidi's lawyer, a tired-looking man named Mr. Obi, stood reluctantly. Mrs. Okafor, isn't it true that you and your husband argued frequently before your accident? We had normal disagreements. Nothing violent. But tensions existed? Your marriage wasn't perfect? No marriage is perfect. And after your accident, didn't you become more difficult to live with? More demanding? More emotional? Barrister Adeyemi shot to his feet. Objection. Counsel is blaming the victim for her disability. Your Honor, Mr. Obi protested, I'm simply establishing that my client was under extreme stress. That doesn't justify violence, Justice Adebisi snapped. Rephrase your question or move on. Mr. Obi shuffled his papers. Mrs. Okafor, you claim my client stole 50 million naira. But isn't it possible there were legitimate business expenses you weren't aware of? The money went to a personal apartment and personal purchases. That's not a business expense. But you weren't working at the company during that time. How can you be sure? Because I reviewed every transaction personally with our forensic accountants, Amara interrupted. Every naira can be traced to purchases for Blessing Okonkwo's apartment. Furniture, appliances, rent payments. Would you like me to list them? Mr. Obi's face reddened. No further questions. Redirect? Justice Adebisi asked. Mrs. Oluwazian stood. Mrs. Okafor, in your expert opinion as the CEO of Okonkwo Industries, were these legitimate business expenses? Absolutely not. They were theft. Plain and simple. Thank you. Nothing further. As Amara wheeled back to her seat, she caught Chidi's eye. He was crying silently, his shoulders shaking. Part of her, a small, wounded part, felt pity. But the stronger part, the part that had survived, felt only relief that he could no longer hurt her. The trial continued for 3 more days. Blessing testified tearfully about the deception, producing text messages where Chidi had promised her marriage and stability. Financial experts walked through the embezzlement evidence. Character witnesses, including Mrs. Nwosu and other employees, testified about Chidi's behavior and lies. On the 4th day, the jury returned with their verdict. On the charge of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of domestic violence, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation via threatening text messages, we find the defendant guilty. Chidi collapsed in his chair, sobbing openly. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder but said nothing. Justice Adebisi looked at Chidi with disgust. Mr. Okafor, you have shown yourself to be a man of profound moral failure. You abused a vulnerable woman, stole from your employer, deceived your mistress, and showed no remorse until you faced consequences. This court sentences you to 8 years in prison for embezzlement and assault, with no possibility of parole for the first 4 years. You will also be required to pay full restitution to Okonkwo Industries and to undergo anger management and rehabilitation programs. 8 years. Amara let the number sink in. 8 years where he couldn't hurt her, couldn't manipulate anyone else, couldn't destroy more lives. As they led Chidi away in handcuffs, he looked at Amara one last time. His expression was impossible to read. Anger? Regret? Defeat? She didn't care anymore. He was someone else's problem now. Outside the courthouse, journalists swarmed. Mrs. Okafor, how do you feel about the verdict? Relieved, she said simply. Justice was served. Do you have anything to say to other domestic violence survivors? Amara paused, looking directly into the cameras. You are not the burden they tell you are. You are not worthless. Your situation, whatever it is, does not define your value. There is help available. There is life after abuse. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The video clip would go viral by evening, shared across social media with hashtags like #JusticeForAmara and #SurvivorSpeak. But Amara didn't see that until later, after she'd returned to her office, 6 months after the trial, Amara stood, metaphorically, at a crossroads. If you had the chance to help others after surviving abuse, would you take it? Comment yes, and tell us where you're watching from. She'd transformed Okonkwo Industries from a traditional corporation into a model of ethical business. She'd fired corrupt managers, implemented transparent accounting systems, and created a foundation to support disabled workers and domestic violence survivors. The company's profits had actually increased under her leadership, proof that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. But the threatening messages hadn't stopped. Once a month, like clockwork, a new text or email arrived from burner phones or anonymous accounts. Never explicit enough to trace legally, but clear in intent. Remember how easy it was to make you cry? You think that wheelchair protects you? I know people on the outside. People who owe me favors. Patients advised increasing security. Barrister Adeyemi suggested pursuing harassment charges. But Amara had grown tired of letting Chidi's shadow control her life. She was free of him physically, he was locked in Kirikiri maximum security prison, but mentally, emotionally, he still had power. That needed to end. I want to visit him, she told her lawyer one morning. Barrister Adeyemi nearly dropped his coffee. Absolutely not. That's exactly what he wants, access to you, a chance to manipulate. I need closure, Amara interrupted. Real closure. Not just a verdict or a sentence. I need to look him in the eye and tell him he doesn't scare me anymore. That he never did truly break me. Amara, he's dangerous. He's in prison. I'll have guards present, cameras recording. But I need to do this. For me. After much debate, the visit was arranged. Maximum security protocols, recording equipment, guards stationed every few meters. Chidi was brought to a visiting room, separated from Amara by reinforced glass, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, his face gaunt and aged beyond his years. He picked up the phone on his side. She picked up hers. I'm surprised you came, he said, his voice raspy. I needed to see you, Amara replied calmly. To understand something. What's that? Why you're still trying to hurt me. Why the messages. Why you can't let go. Chidi was silent for a long moment. You destroyed my life. No, Chidi. You destroyed your own life. I just stopped enabling it. You could have helped me. Could have given me a second chance. But you chose revenge. I chose survival, Amara corrected. I chose to stop being your victim. That's not revenge, that's self-preservation. You took everything from me, his voice rose. My job, my reputation, my freedom. You took those things from yourself when you chose to abuse me, steal from the company, and betray everyone who trusted you. I didn't make you hit me, Chidi. I didn't make you embezzle funds. I didn't make you lie to Blessing. Those were your choices. I was stressed. I was dealing with so much, your accident, the medical bills, the pressure at work. And you decided to cope by making me your punching bag, Amara said flatly. Millions of people deal with stress without becoming abusers. You don't get to hide behind excuses anymore. Chidi's face twisted. You're so high and mighty now. So powerful. But you're still in that wheelchair, Amara. You're still broken. She'd heard that word so many times, broken. He'd used it as a weapon, a tool to diminish her, to make her feel less than human. But sitting there, looking at him through reinforced glass, she realized something profound. You're right, she said quietly. My body is broken. My spine was damaged in that accident, and no amount of money or power will change that. I'll be in this wheelchair for the rest of my life. Chidi looked triumphant, thinking he'd won. But I'm not broken, Amara continued. My body has limitations. But my mind, my spirit, my capacity for joy and love and success, none of that was ever broken. You tried to break those things. You tried to convince me that physical disability meant total worthlessness. But you were wrong. I gave you everything. You gave me abuse disguised as care. You gave me cruelty disguised as honesty. You gave me a prison disguised as a home. What you never gave me was respect, dignity, or the basic human decency every person deserves. So what do you want? Chidi demanded. You came here to gloat? To show me how much better your life is now? I came here to tell you that I forgive you. Chidi's eyes widened in shock. Not because you deserve it, Amara clarified. Not because what you did was okay. But because holding on to anger at you is like drinking poison and expecting you to die. I forgive you so I can be free of you completely. So you have no power over me, not even the power to make me hate. I don't want your forgiveness, Chidi spat. That's fine. I'm not giving it for you. I'm giving it for me. She leaned closer to the glass. Here's what's going to happen, Chidi. You're going to serve your time. You're going to reflect on your choices, or you're not, that's up to you. But either way, I'm moving forward. I'm running a successful company. I'm helping other survivors. I'm building a life that has nothing to do with you. And the messages? He asked quietly. The threats? They're going to stop. Because I'm filing additional charges for harassment. Every message has been documented, traced back to people visiting you or accounts you've accessed through your lawyer. You'll get more time added to your sentence, and your communication privileges will be revoked completely. Chidi's face went pale. You can't. I can. And I will. Because the one thing you need to understand is this, I'm not afraid of you anymore. I survived your worst, Chidi. I survived your fists, your words, your betrayal. Whatever, a toast, Barrister Adeyemi raised his glass. To Amara Okafor, a woman who turned tragedy into triumph, who refused to be defined by anyone's limitations, and who now helps hundreds of people through her foundation. Here, everyone chorused. As Amara looked around the room, at the people who'd stood by her, at the life she'd rebuilt from nothing, she felt genuinely happy for the first time in years. The journey from victim to survivor to victor had been long and painful, but she'd made it. Her phone buzzed. For a moment, old fear flickered. Another threat? But no. It was a message from the prison system, inmate number 45782, Chidi Okafor, communication privileges revoked. Additional 18 months added to sentence for harassment. No further contact permitted. Amara smiled and deleted the message. That chapter of her life was truly closed now. What are you smiling about? Blessing asked, settling carefully into a chair beside her. Freedom, Amara replied simply. Real freedom. I'm going to name her Amara, Blessing said suddenly, touching her swollen belly. If it's a girl. After you. Because you showed me what real strength looks like. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. You honor me. But she'll be her own person, strong in her own way. Absolutely, Blessing agreed. But she'll know the story of how you survived, how you turned pain into power, how you refused to let anyone make you small. That's a legacy worth passing on. Later that night, after everyone had left, Amara sat alone in her living room with a glass of wine and a sense of peace. Her journey wasn't over. There would be challenges ahead, difficult days, moments when her disability presented obstacles. But she knew now that she could handle them. She'd survived the worst. Everything else was just life. Her laptop pinged with an email from her PR team. Mrs. Okafor, we've received multiple interview requests, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. They want to feature your story of survival and success. Should we accept? Amara thought about it for a long moment. Part of her wanted privacy, wanted to leave the trauma behind and move forward quietly. But another part, the part that had testified in court, that had started the foundation, that wanted to help others, knew her story could make a difference. She typed her response, accept them all. If my story can help even one person leave an abusive situation, it's worth sharing. 3 months later, Amara sat in a television studio, being interviewed for a special on domestic violence and disability rights. The host asked her the question everyone wanted to know. Looking back, do you regret anything? Amara thought carefully. I regret staying as long as I did. I regret believing I was worthless. I regret not asking for help sooner. But I don't regret the journey, because it taught me who I really am. I discovered strength I didn't know I had. I learned that physical limitation doesn't mean personal limitation. And I found a purpose, helping others who are where I once was. What would you say to someone currently in an abusive relationship? Amara looked directly into the camera. You are not alone. You are not the problem. And you deserve better. There are resources, shelters, hotlines, organizations dedicated to helping you leave safely. It won't be easy. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. But your life is worth fighting for. Your dignity is worth protecting. And there is hope on the other side of survival. The interview aired across Africa and internationally. The response was overwhelming, messages from survivors, from people inspired to leave toxic situations, from families who recognized the signs of abuse and intervened. Amara's foundation received triple the donations in the following month, allowing them to expand their services. A year after the trial, Okonkwo Industries hosted a gala for the foundation. Dignitaries, celebrities, and survivors filled the ballroom. Amara wheeled to the podium to give the opening speech, looking out at faces representing hope and resilience. A wise woman once told me that our greatest struggles become our greatest strengths, she began. I didn't believe her at the time. I couldn't see how surviving abuse, living with a disability, losing everything I thought defined me could possibly make me stronger. But she was right. Tonight, we celebrate survival. We celebrate the hundreds of people who found safety through our shelters, who found employment through our programs, who found hope through our counseling services. Every person here represents a victory, not over our abusers, but over the lie that we deserved the abuse. Over the belief that we were helpless. Over the fear that we couldn't survive alone. We not only survived, we thrived. And we'll continue to thrive, supporting each other, lifting each other up, and showing the world that no one gets to define our worth except ourselves. The applause was thunderous. Standing ovation, and those who couldn't stand waved their hands in the air, a sea of celebration and solidarity. As Amara wheeled off the stage, she passed a mirror and caught her reflection. The woman looking back was confident, powerful, unbroken. The woman she'd always been, underneath the fear and pain. She'd come full circle, from victim to survivor to victor. And now, guide for others on the same journey. Her phone buzzed one last time that evening. But instead of a threat, it was a message from a woman she'd never met. Thank you for your story. Because of you, I left my abusive husband today. I'm scared, but I'm free. Thank you for showing me it's possible. Amara saved the message, adding it to the hundreds of others in a folder labeled, Why We Fight. These messages, these lives changed, were her real revenge against Chidi. Not his imprisonment, not his downfall, but the proof that his cruelty hadn't destroyed her capacity to help others. She'd turned his worst into her best. And that was the ultimate victory. What an incredible journey. Comment, Survivor, if Amara's story inspired you. Hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. We have more powerful African marriage drama stories coming your way. Share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible. Let us know in the comments, what was your favorite moment from this story? And where are you watching from? Lagos? London? Los Angeles? Don't forget to like this video if you believe in justice, redemption, and the power of the human spirit. See you in the next story. The end. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.